A reading from Luke's Gospel, the 12th chapter, verses 13 through 34. Listen for God's word. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Friend, who set me to be a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care. Be on guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly. And he thought to himself, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax. Eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool. This very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God." Jesus said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? And can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your span of life? If then you are not able to do so small a thing as that, why do you worry about the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin, yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not clothed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? And do not keep striving for what you are to eat and what you are to drink. And do not keep worrying, for it is the nations of the world that strive after all these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, strive for his kingdom, and these things will be added to you as well. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven where no thief comes and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. As I mentioned last week, I was in my 30s when I went to seminary, so I sat through quite a few stewardship sermons in my life before I became a minister. And one of those I sat through, we had a guest minister who came in to speak at the church where I was a member at the time. And I remember a story. Now, this is again, from my 30s, and I'm almost 60 now, so I may have some of the details wrong. But I remember a story he told, and I'm going to try to retell it today. It concerned a friend of his. They had grown up together, and now one gentleman, the gentleman telling the story, found himself a Presbyterian minister, and the other person had become a Catholic priest. Well, they had decided it was time, since they were both kind of in the God business, right, to get together. So the minister went to visit this man, and he was living in a large city. I believe it was New York City. And when they got to where the priest lived, and they opened up the door, the minister was stunned. The room was like a small dorm room in a college. There was a desk. There was a single bed. There was an open closet like they used to have in the dorm rooms, right? That doesn't have a door because the college students break the doors off. And in that closet, there were a few things hanging there, his reverend rigs, as we call it, and a few casual items. And that was it. That was all. And as he looked around, the minister finally turned to his friend and said, "Is that it?" And his friend's like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, where's your stuff? Where is your stuff?" Because you see, we all have stuff, right? Some of us have a lot of stuff. Some of us have rooms and closets stuffed full of stuff. But the question for us today has to do with this idea of stuff. Where is your stuff? Where is our stuff? And is our stuff wrapped up in the stuff of the world, as this minister was thinking? Or is our stuff wrapped up in the stuff of God? Where is your stuff? Many of you, I am sure, have heard of restless leg syndrome. Maybe some of you haven't. And it is a condition where you have twitches and contractions in the leg. And people kind of laugh about it, but it can be very serious. It can impact your sleep. It can have all sorts of effect on you. But it's when your legs are kind of always moving, particularly at night when you're trying to sleep. Well, Methodist minister Adam Hamilton, we've done several of his books in Sunday school here. He likes to talk about something a little different. Instead of restless leg syndrome, he talks about restless heart syndrome. And restless heart syndrome works in a similar way, but it is in the heart or the soul, not our legs. And the primary symptom of restless heart syndrome is discontent. Discontent. We find, if we are suffering from this, that we are never satisfied with anything. We never have enough stuff. And the moment we acquire something, we scarcely take the time to enjoy it before we want something else, before we want more stuff, new stuff, different stuff. We are, Hamilton says, perennially discontent. Now, here's the interesting thing about that, though. I've already mentioned about, are we concerned with the stuff of the world or the stuff with God? What if this discontent that Hamilton is talking about is something that God actually intended for us to have? What if God actually wired our hearts so that we would not be content with certain things, certain stuff, causing us to seek the only one, the right stuff, in other words, that can finally and fully satisfy us? What if the discontent we feel in our lives was placed there by God so that ultimately we would seek contentment in God? You see, we are hardwired to yearn for our relationship with God, to cultivate a deeper prayer life, to pursue justice and holiness with increasing fervor. We are hardwired to love others more and to grow in grace and character and wisdom with each passing day. That's what we are made to do, but we forget that and we try to find our contentment elsewhere. You see, the problem is that those things we should be content with are the very things we find ourselves hopelessly discontented with. For example, we find ourselves discontented with our stuff, or maybe our jobs, perhaps our friends or our family, our children, our spouse. Hamilton says God must look down on us and feel the way we feel when we give someone a special gift and they open it and the first thing they ask for is the gift receipt so that they can return it. It's as if we're saying to God, God, I don't like what you have given to me, and I want to trade that in for something that I think will be better. In other words, we reject the God stuff, what we are wired to pursue, and instead seek our contentment in the world stuff. Hamilton goes on to suggest that there are 4 keys to cultivating contentment in our lives. The Apostle Paul is an excellent example of contentment in his letter to Philippians in the 4th chapter. He talks about his secret of contentment. He says he can be content in all things. We'll talk more about Paul next week. Like Paul, we can learn to be content in whatever circumstances we may find ourselves. And Hamilton again suggests 4 keys, which include the secret Paul referred to in his letter. Number 1, there are 4 words in order to cultivate contentment, there are 4 words we need to always repeat. These are those 4 words. It could be worse. It could be worse. John Ortberg, the pastor at Menlo Park Presbyterian, former pastor at Menlo Park Presbyterian Church in California, says those are the words that we should always say whenever we find ourselves discontented with something or someone. It could be worse. This is essentially the practice of looking on the bright side or finding the silver lining. It is recognizing that no matter what we may not like about a thing or a person or a situation or a circumstance, we can always find something good to focus on if only we choose to do so. So the first key is those 4 words, remembering it could be worse. The second is a question we should always ask ourselves. How long will this make me happy? So often we buy something like a book, thinking it will make us happy, only to find that the happiness lasts about as long as it takes to open the box. One of the amazing things about Amazon is they figured it out with the Prime membership, right? You can order something and it's there the next day. It's almost immediate gratification. There is a moment of satisfaction when we make the purchase, but the item does not continue to bring satisfaction over a period of time. Many of the things we buy simply are not worth the expense. And that's why we should ask this question before buying something. How long will this make me happy? Number 3, develop a grateful heart. Gratitude, appreciating what God has done for us, is essential if we are to be content. The Apostle Paul says that we are to give thanks in all circumstances. As a preview, that is next Sunday's Stewardship Dedication Sunday sermon. A grateful heart recognizes, and think back to what we talked about last week, a grateful heart recognizes that all of life is a gift. Contentment comes when we spend more time giving thanks for what we have than thinking about what's missing. Develop a grateful heart was number 3. Number 4, where does your soul find true satisfaction? Where does your soul find true satisfaction? The world tells us that we find satisfaction in all the stuff we can get, in luxury or comfort or money. The Bible, however, answers this question very differently. From Genesis to Revelation, it tells us that we find our satisfaction in God alone. St. Augustine said this, "Thou hast made us for thyself, O Lord," and listen to this, "and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in thee." Psalm 63 says, "O God, you are my God. I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My soul is satisfied as with a rich feast, and my mouth praises you with joyful lips when I think of you on my bed and meditate on you in the watches of the night." Or how about Ecclesiastes, normally associated with Solomon, a man who had it all, right? And who realized in the end that it didn't really matter. Ecclesiastes 2 says this, "Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had spent in doing it, and all was vanity and chasing after the wind." And then in Matthew's Gospel, the 22nd chapter, Jesus said that the two most important things we must do are to love your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. If we focus on these two things, we will find satisfaction for our souls and lasting contentment in our lives. So how do we do this? Well, Hamilton suggests 5 steps that we can use to simplify and clean up and begin cleaning out some of this world stuff so we can focus on the God stuff. The first is this: set a goal of reducing your consumption and live below your means. Set a tangible goal to reduce your own personal consumption and the production of waste in your life. For example, one of the things he mentions is shopping bags. I have a closet in my spare room, and I have a spare room, more on that in a minute, but I have a closet in my spare bedroom that has a big shopping bag. And it's made out of fabric. And do you know what's in that shopping bag? That shopping bag is full of other fabric shopping bags. And I never get it out. And every time I go shopping, I get those plastic bags. And then I end up with a big pile. And at least now I begun taking them up here and putting them in the sound room for the blessing box. But it's interesting to note that I never give a thought to what I'm consuming, what I'm doing. Whenever you are making purchases, he suggests, look at the mid-grade instead of the top-of-the-line product. I had an elder in one of my former churches that drove a nice Buick. And he was a very wealthy man. He could have driven anything he wanted. But his philosophy in life was that we should go through life thinking ourselves as just a nice Buick. You don't have to live an old jalopy life, and you don't have to be a fancy sports car. But you don't have to have everything. He said the same thing about the church. One of the problems in the church is the same thing. We should look at our lives and find ways to reduce our consumption. Do I really need this? Number 2 is that simply. Before making a purchase, ask yourself, do I really need this? Or I just want this? These questions will help determine the true motivation for your desired purchase. Is it a need? Is it perhaps a self-esteem issue? Well, my neighbor just got that, so I've got to keep up. Or is it maybe something else? You may find yourself wrestling with your true motive and decide that your reason for purchasing something is not a good one. Just because it's on sale doesn't mean you need it, in other words. Number 3, use something up before buying something new. Hamilton suggests that we should take care of the things we buy and use them until they are empty, broken, or worn out. Buy things that are made to last, and when buying things that have a short lifespan, spend your money wisely. Did you know that it is true today with many things, appliances, anything electronic, a television, a phone, anything like that? There is now a term that they use in those areas called built-in obsolescence. In other words, they are built to only last so long before you will need a new one. And actually, you're probably going to get a new one when you want it and not when you need it. Because, well, the new model is out and it's such a deal. I knew someone one time that had an iPhone. I'm sure it doesn't even work anymore, but had an iPhone, and it was like the first one, and it was somebody that could get, the iPhones that are like this, that you have to strap onto your back, that size. And they were talking about it, and I said, why don't you get a new one? He said, because Steve Jobs will have to return from the dead before I'll buy another phone. Well, that might be a little bit extreme, but it is interesting. Do we let ourselves get talked into buying the nicest and newest and most shiny? Number 4, plan low-cost entertainment that enriches. When it comes to choosing entertainment for your family or friends, plan things that are simple and cheap. There are many things we can do that are free or almost free. You'll be amazed at how much more pleasure you derive from low-cost, simple activities. I'm still a cable subscriber. And I have had a number of people tell me, oh, you got to get a new TV, and you got to get rid of cable, and you've got to get this service and this service and this service and this service and all of those things. And I was sitting there recently watching television, and on all my channels I could find nothing on. And I said, you know what, maybe they are right. Maybe I need that. And being the loyal Amazon customer that I am, I have a Prime membership. And as I was sitting there thinking, it suddenly occurred to me that I'm paying for a Prime membership. I can watch anything on Amazon Prime anytime I want to on my computer. But I had not even thought about that. I was ready to make the step to spend a bunch of money and get all these services. And no, I won't be able to watch everything. But I had gotten so wrapped up in it that I was ready to go and do all of that. Finally, ask yourself, are there major changes that would allow me to simplify my life? Are there things that you could do, things you can get rid of, the things you can let go of? Ask yourself questions related to your home, possessions, job, activities, to identify changes that might serve to simplify your life. It could be, in fact, it probably is, that the less stuff, worldly stuff we have, the more we pay attention to the heavenly stuff God is giving to us. Now that will require some degree of self-control. Simplifying your life requires the practice of self-control. Solomon wrote in Proverbs, like a city whose walls are broken through, think about that, is a person who lacks self-control. Think about a city with a wall that's broken down and anybody can go in. That's the way we are when we don't have self-control. When a city's walls are broken through, the enemy can march right in and destroy it. There is no longer any protection. Likewise, self-control is a wall around our hearts and our lives that protects us from ourselves, from temptations, and from sins that are deadly and can ultimately destroy us. Self-control often comes down to making a choice between instant gratification, I've got to have it now, and delayed gratification for a much greater cause. So, we end where we started. Where's your stuff? Where's your stuff? Is it piled up in what the world tells us we need to have? Or are we leaving all of that stuff behind so that we can find our true contentment in the stuff of God? Where's your stuff? Where's your stuff? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.